What's up guys, it's me Jeremy, and it's been quite a while since I updated my support tier list, and it's changed a ton since then. Keep in mind that this is a solo queue tier list, so champions are graded into their respective tiers based on their playmaking and carry potential, as well as how much they can assist your team as a whole, and how common it is for them to be a good pick. Champions in tier 3 are mostly uncompetitive picks, and while you may perform well on them if you're experienced, they are heavily outclassed in pretty much every situation. Tier 2 support champions are strong, but only in certain situations, and while they do have the strength to be in a tier 1 pick, if you pick them in a situation where you shouldn't, they will be very weak, as well as some of the tier 2 champions have some pretty significant weaknesses. While tier 1 champions you can play in pretty much any situation and have solid playmaking and carry potential. There's 20 champions on this list, and any other champions that were not on this list I would personally consider to be heavily untested and for the most part unviable. Anyways, let's get started. Starting from the bottom of tier 3, the worst support that isn't really a troll pick, we have Kayle. Now, to be completely honest, Kayle isn't really good. Her ult is her only redeeming feature, but when you want to counter assassins with that kind of tool, Lulu will do that job much better. Add into that an extremely weak lane since Kayle needs items and ability power to scale up, and you're left with a support that isn't really very good. Next on the list, we have Soraka. Now the weird thing is that Soraka is actually a pretty strong pick in competitive play, but when it comes to playmaking ability, Soraka has pretty much zero. While Soraka is not that weak in reality, it relies very heavily, too much so, on your AD carry being really good, better than your opponents, and that's not the kind of champion you want to play in solo queue. However, she is a bit stronger in duo queue as well as in team play, but for the most part, she has fairly weak lanes versus the top tier champions right now, so I find her to be weak overall. After Soraka, we have Nunu. With the changes to AD carry items, I thought Nunu might be a little bit higher, but in reality, he is just so weak in lane, and since his consume is useless, and his blood boil is almost useless in lane, it makes this kid really linear and overall low utility. Although his teamfights are definitely solid, the nerfs from way back simply just crushed him, and while his ultimate is definitely still strong, it's very difficult to make plays with it, so he's placed in tier 3. After Nunu, we have Lux. While Lux may be somewhat of a strong support, with a decent lane and decent peel, she is very heavily outclassed by similar supports such as Zyra or Morgana. There probably isn't a single situation where you would want to pick Lux over those two, except for where you're just a god at Lux. She might be okay on her own, but she's pretty much outclassed in every aspect by those champions, so she's in tier 3. Next we have Alistar. Alistar is no doubt viable in competitive play, but his extremely difficult mechanics, weak lane, and huge mana cost overall make it very difficult to succeed with him in solo queue. However, he does seem to have confirmed buffs on the PvE, so expect him to rise up the list in future patches. And rounding out tier 3, we have Taric. Taric is a classic case of nerfs hitting a bit too hard. What was once the best support in the game is no longer a competitive pick. His kit was always fairly linear with his stun, but he made up for it by being the only support who was naturally tanky with great sustain. They nerfed his tankiness and his damage, and now those two are pretty much just major weaknesses in his kit overall. He's still easy to play and easy to play with though, so he's at the top of tier 3. And now onto tier 2, and at the bottom we actually have Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks was always an interesting pick to say the least, and he requires a ton of skill to exploit his strengths. His lane is fairly decent, but with the nerf to his fear duration and the overall fear changes, his teamfights are not as strong as they used to be. However, he does have some synergy with certain AD carries, as well as certain compositions, so he can be viable, and I've seen certain builds wreak havoc versus weak lanes as well, so he definitely has the potential, and there's no doubt that he has the power to succeed, but most of his plays can be avoided versus a knowledgeable player who knows how to avoid his ultimates. After Fiddlesticks, I actually have Blitzcrank. There's no doubt that Blitzcrank's playmaking ability can be huge, but that takes a ton of skill while also relying on your opponents to be bad, which isn't something you want to do. Add into that the majority of top tier picks are very strong versus Blitzcrank, such as Morgana, Leona, and Thresh, and you're left with a fairly lackluster champion who has the same problem of before that he always had, of not fitting any team compositions. If it wasn't for his playmaking ability, he would probably even be in tier 3. So I only recommend playing Blitz if you're good at him. After Blitzcrank, we have Gragas. With the changes to Gragas' kit, there's no doubt that he has the potential as support with a slow, stun, and knockback all in his kit while still being fairly tanky. He's somewhat of an untested, unplayed pick though, that isn't seen too often, so we could definitely move up in this list, as he's great at peeling some champions. However, Gragas can suffer in lane versus some matchups, but he's mostly this low only since he isn't seen too often, and I'm not very experienced in knowing how strong he is. Potentially consider Gragas as an underrated pick. After Gragas, we have Janna. Now in reality, Janna does pretty much the same thing Gragas does, but with a bit more utility and a bit less tankiness. However, her tornado can stop tons of abilities, unlike Gragas' stun, so it definitely has much more utility. However, I think Janna is a little bit difficult to play in solo queue since it once again relies on your AD carry to play really well and use your kit effectively just like Soraka, which isn't really something you can always rely on in solo queue. However, she is a great pick versus some champions such as Leona, so Janna does have a place in some locations of the current meta. After Janna, we have Lulu. Now, although Lulu is one of my personal top favorite supports, the problem with Lulu is that she is very, very weak in a situation where your team does not synergize well with your ultimate. If you have a team that works well with your ultimate, such as champions that dive in like Vi or Nocturne, Lulu can easily be a tier 1 or even the best overall pick in that situation due to the power and synergy her ultimate has, as well as her overall utility. But if you don't have that synergy within your team, Lulu is an uncompetitive pick in that situation. So be careful with Lulu, and I would only strongly recommend playing her in places where she has synergy with her teammates. Rounding out the top of tier 2, we have Karma. Karma is in kind of a similar situation as Lulu. She needs teammates to synergize with her kit to perform optimally, so you can't pick her in every situation, but she does have somewhat of a strong lane and pretty solid utility overall, so she definitely deserves the top of tier 2. At the bottom of tier 1, we have Sona. Sona's teamfights are definitely as strong as ever, and the plays you can make with her ultimate are huge, but she does have some poor lane matchups, so she's placed at the bottom of tier 1. Next, we have Annie. Annie's overall kit has so much raw power for making plays, especially her level 6, which is a huge power spike. However, her squishiness with no sustain makes it easy to capitalize efficiently on small positioning mistakes that the Annie player makes, so avoiding poke and engages on her is of the utmost importance, and can be easy or hard to take advantage of, depending on your skill level with her. After Annie, we have Zyra. Zyra is similar to Annie in that she has the same strengths and the same weaknesses. She has awesome playmaking ability with her high damage and crowd control, while still being squishy with no sustain, which can be a huge problem or something that you play around well, depending on how good you are at her. But overall, her damage and utility make her fairly strong. Next up, we have Leona. Leona is awesome, and personally, my favorite support. But she only got number 5 due to the fact that she now has poor matchups in lane. Morgana in particular is a huge counter to Leona, making it incredibly difficult to engage in lane, and she just shuts down your whole kit almost completely, requiring a massive skill advantage to come out on top. She's still great with her tankiness, crowd control, and let's not forget her damage, which is actually pretty solid, and Leona is an amazing pick as long as you don't get countered in lane. After Leona, we have Nami. Nami's utility is just off the charts. Her bubble is able to stop key abilities just like Flay and Janna's tornado, stuff like that, while her having so much crowd control with her ultimate, bubble, and slow in combination with her heal makes her a great pick for solo queue. She does great at protecting her carries, while also being able to set up fights with initiations, thus making plays. However, she is a little bit squishy, but once again, that's something you can play around with, especially with your sustain. Taking home the bronze medal, we have Morgana. If you've ever played against a Morgana support, you'll know that she's one of the most annoying things in the game to deal with, and she has a good or at least decent matchup versus pretty much everyone. Her Black Shield is a huge counter to champions like Leona, as well as to kits such as others like Vi. Picking Morgana versus comps that rely on key skills to engage makes it so difficult for your opponents if you Black Shield properly. Add into that her binding is almost comparable to a Blitzcrank hook in terms of playmaking ability, and her only downside is really just having long cooldowns, which, like most of the weaknesses of the tier 1 supports, can be avoided if you play properly. And bringing home silver, we have Braum. Braum used to be number 1, but due to his slight nerfs, he's just a little bit weaker now. He still has the same old kit with an unbelievably strong early game, so he's definitely a solid pick and one of, if not the tankiest support out there, so his weaknesses can be difficult to capitalize on as well. And he's one of the only supports with defensive mobility, which can really help you stay alive too. If you get great at using his shield, Braum is definitely an amazing champion. And lastly, of course, taking home the gold, we have Thresh. Thresh's utility is simply just unmatched. His hook gives you crazy playmaking ability, his flay massive outplay potential versus a majority of kits in the game, and his lantern incredible teamwork and ability to save allies from being picked off, and add into that he's ranged with good auto attack harass, and that leaves you with a champion that is great throughout all phases of the game. However, the thing about Thresh is that he can be difficult to play. So for many people, he is likely not the number 1 candidate. You need to be able to use your flay to cancel abilities, lantern to initiate ganks and save allies, and your hook to set up fights and make plays. And if you can't do that, he's not that strong. But if you can, it takes a lot of skill, but if you can pull it off, he is unmatched in power. And that's just about it. Keep in mind that this list is basically just my opinion. You may have had more or less success with some of these champions, so let me know what you think, or what changes you would make to the list in the comments. My name is Jeremy, and that's it for my support tier list on patch 4.11. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out some of my others on the screen right now, or stay connected at facebook.com/gamingcurios. Drop a like, share this video, and make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.